And welcome back to Who Would Win. And today's Who Would Win comes to us from Special K. Now, I should note, I don't think you actually suggested these for me to do. You were listing off suggestions of death battles you'd like to see, but I decided to put them down anyway. So, Special K, you asked to see Man-Bat, who basically asked the question, who would win in a fight? What you'd like to see death battle do? Man-Bat versus Morbius, the living vampire. Now, I can see where these could make sense as a matchup. They're both bat-based. They're both humans that turned into bat-like beings. With Man-Bat, it was Kirk Langstrom. He was a scientist, a biogeneticist, professional human eater, as says one of his abilities. In terms of turning into the bat with the serum, he gains the ability of flight. He has claws on his hand. He has claws on his feet, and also on his hands too. Although his hands pretty much turn into wings. It all depends on the interpretation. You can either get him with separate hands and separate wings, or the standard, bat style where your hands become wings. Either way, he still has claws on those. He has above human strength and speed. He has echolocation, which is how he functions. Moving things around. He does have enhanced vision, hearing, and smell. But still, he is pretty much just a humanoid bat mutant. Morbius is a self-made vampire. He's an accidental vampire, not bitten. He's not a supernatural being. He is a genetic vampire. Because he has pseudo-vampirism, he is not actually bound by any of the mystical weaknesses that vampires have, including garlic, silver, running water. He's even not. Sunlight doesn't actually even kill him, though he still is very vulnerable in the sunlight. He needs to drink blood periodically to survive. Physically, he can lift up to 1,500 pounds, so half a ton. Oh no, in fact, 3/4 a ton, basically. Roughly speaking, in that range, almost a near ton. He can at his peak. It all depends on actually how much blood he's ingested, pretty much. If we were to get him at his peak, then we'll see what happens there. Superhuman speed, though, not like speedster level, but he moves faster than normal. Enhanced reflexes, stamina, acute senses, fangs and claws. He does have the ability to glide, as well as having a regenerative healing factor, although he can't regenerate limbs, and more severe the wound, the longer it's going to take to heal. The minor wounds will heal pretty quick. He does have a level of hypnosis. He has to stare into the eyes of there's a victim to do so, and a powerful enough will can overcome that. He can create other vampires, but he does have a genius level intellect too. He is a brilliant scientist and biochemist. He is a formidable combatant in hand-to-hand combat as well, though he has no formal training in that. So if these two met in combat, let's say Morbius is showing around Gotham and runs into Man-Bat one night, who would win? Well, right off the bat, Morbius can glide. He does have a psychic gliding ability, so he doesn't need to flap his wings to fight, or to fly. So right off the bat, he has an advantage in flight. But Man-Bat can adjust his speed and probably go even faster than 35 miles an hour, which is his limit in terms of gliding. So, because he has a limit in terms of gliding, that does give Man-Bat a bit of an edge as well. Plus, Man-Bat can also maneuver kind of like, what's the best way to put it? Maneuver aeronautically, acrobatically. I guess he's more acrobatic, I'd say, than Morbius would be, just because Morbius can only move and has a limit to how fast he moves. So these two collide me in mid-air. They're suddenly duking it out. In terms of pure strength, I have to believe Morbius, if he's at full capacity, fully fed, at his peak, he is the stronger of the two. But Man-Bat is just going to be more vicious, ultimately, because he's more of a animal. He's more animalistic. So they're going to be duking it out for a little bit. One is trying to bite the other. And neither of them are really getting any ground. Now, here's the thing. Depending on what interpretation of Morbius you get, he does, he can, what's the best way to put it? Sometimes he has, like in the anime series, has these little sucking like mouths, like leech mouths on his hands. Other times he doesn't. So from most common continuities I can tell, he generally doesn't, so we're not going to give him the little sucker. So he's not just draining Man-Bat's blood from that. But he can still bite in the Man-Bat, so he bites in the Man-Bat. Man-Bat screams out, and Man-Bat, again, being vicious and larger. Let's not forget this, that in terms of size, they clock roughly, all depending on your interpretation, but roughly speaking, he's usually depicted Morbius at about 5'10" and around 170 pounds. Man-Bat, on the other hand, if we can get an actual, because I have a Batman wiki up here. Let's see. Ooh, okay, that might work. Let's see what the average size for Man-Bat is at 7'4", which means he's already almost a foot and a half taller than Morbius, and 315 pounds. So he's already already physically larger than Morbius is. So he's easily able to like overwhelm him in terms of just the sheer size. And again, I think at their peaks, Morbius is stronger, but Langstrom is no slouch either. So using his echolocation and the surrounding buildings kind of crashes Morbius into a building. Morbius can't, because that's a lot of weight that's being thrown at him. That's more than he was expecting. Even though he can lift 1,500 pounds, that doesn't mean that 315 pounds lunging at him isn't going to maybe cause him to strain. So now they're kind of throwing each other in the buildings. Now here comes the tricky part. Both of these guys have enhanced senses. Would the enhanced senses of Morbius, because his enhanced senses include enhanced sense of sight and smell, are enhanced as well beyond normal human distance. It'll detect objects with perfect clarity at much greater distance than a normal human. He retains clarity even in near total darkness. He's able to see into infrared. His sense of smell is somewhat enhanced. Doesn't actually say anything about his hearing, surprising. He has acute senses, but I'd have to assume that applies to his hearing. But if they're not specifically talking about his hearing, I can't go too much into saying the echolocation would mess up his hearing. But he doesn't have echolocation either, so that's only Man-Bat's real key weakness in that form. Apart from, the fact that he's just a giant creature, so you could kill him. So they're going to be duking it out. Maybe he does some echolocation in Morbius' face, and maybe it does cause him to kind of, what are you doing? And then, because I can't do whatever accent he had in the series. I can't even remember what he was. He wasn't Russian. He was like, it was like a Transylvanian accent. He kind of sounded like that. That's what he sounded like. Which, oddly enough, does have a little bit of a Russian sound to it. So they again crash through a building. They're in an office building, let's say. And now Morbius comes in and rushes and now starts, gaining the advantage because Langstrom still can't really think straight. There are interpretations where he does have his mentality back, but his coherency, but Morbius always has that. And Morbius is still got the relative form of a human, so he knows how to fight and can fight. He's not an expert fighter, but he can generally get a stance and know how to fight. So, that way he can now duck in, start giving the lethal points, start, drinking and feeding off Man-Bat more. Ultimately, it's just going to come down to the fact that Morbius just has a physically tougher physiology. He has a regenerative healing factor 2, which would play a big factor in the fight. Most of the damage that Langstrom would probably get in on him would not last. So it would just be superficial damage. And, as long as Morbius is able to feed off Langstrom for a while, he'll be able to regenerate even quicker. So ultimately, it's going to just come down to who's going to outlast the other and who's going to get the better hits in. And it's going to be Morbius, in my opinion. Morbius, being a genetically created vampire, has more or less most of the abilities vampires in the Marvel Universe have, minus the supernatural weaknesses. So Morbius is just the guy who turned into a bat mutant. That's it. So ultimately, I got to go with Morbius in this fight. Now, is there a way that Man-Bat could win? Absolutely. He's still larger. He's still heavier. He's still probably got a lot of physical strength, so he could probably hoist freaking Morbius onto a spike or something like that. Now, Morbius has Morbius's regeneration is capable of allowing him to survive something like a stake through the heart, provided he gets enough time to regenerate or if he gets some blood in him. But if he gets skewered, Man-Bat could come in and start feeding on Morbius, and that would be not good for Morbius. So ultimately, ultimately, there is a way Man-Bat could win, but most of the time, I'm going to say that it's going to be Morbius. I think most people would go with Morbius. But let me know if you think there's a legitimate way Man-Bat could win. I'd be curious to hear that. And I'm not going to argue that at all. This is one of those fights where I'm pretty dead set in who I think is going to win. I'm open to having my mind changed about most things. So that's my thoughts on that, though. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe. As always, you want us to review something, put in the comments below. Let us know. We'll do a review of it at some point. And I guess who would win, Star Wars, Super Magic, what if, anything to do on the channel. Put that in the comments below as well. I'll get to that at some point. I got a what if to do because it's a week of what ifs, so stay tuned for that. And I'll see you later, folks. Have a good one.